And welcome to Westside's Champion Plaza here at Phelps Field for this week's Nebraska High School Game Day show, the last week of the regular season, and we're about to break it all down for you. I'm John Willis, joined alongside Jaden Taylor. Jaden, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It's a lot of great matchups here tonight. We saw a lot of games last night in a lot of Thursday night matchups, even some better ones here tonight. We saw St. Thomas Aquinas going to go up against Westside here. Probably the best matchup we're going to see all week. A lot of games to recap from this last week. John, what'd you see?
Well, we had a lot of pretty good games. Millard North and Grand Island, that went down to the wire. 38-35 was your final in that game. Really went back and forth throughout the whole fourth quarters and went into overtime. Lincoln Southeast dominated Bellevue East. Not a whole surprise there. And Westside, of course, you were out there for them against Norfolk. So kind of what did you see from those first three games?
We saw there, in that first Grand Island Millard North game. Millard North was using that ground game, and that's really what set the table for them back and forth. That's why they're able to win that game. You have Acquaintance, of course. We saw him a few weeks ago here at Westside, and he was just really a great factor for that team, and that's what he's been all season. We've seen Acquaintance, we've seen multiple guys on that Millard North O-line, and they're finally really able to put it together in a game against Grand Island. It was a great setup for them. Then you go up against, we have Lincoln Southeast. Not much of a proven test there for Lincoln Southeast, and that's not what we've seen much this year. Lincoln Southeast has had a really easy schedule this year. They're really on the bubble between the top four teams, especially going into this last week of the season.
I was really impressed with how Millard North played. Against a decent team, one that we talked about wasn't living up to expectations this year. But I really like what Quaince is doing there for Millard North. I don't think they're going to go very far in the playoffs, but I think they're a better team than what their record shows just because of how hard their schedule has been this season. So now looking at our other games, not a big surprise once again with Bellevue West dominating Millard West, 42-7. But then Lincoln Pius holding on against Columbus, only losing by 10, 34-24. And then Lincoln East beating number 10 North Platte 21-7. So, North Platte, they're ranked in the top 10 right now. They lose another after their second straight loss, but they've been to top 10 opponents. So where do you kind of see North Platte at right now?
Well, like we said, I'm a really big North Platte supporter so far this year. They've had a really good season. They've been able to get some big wins up against even some lower teams such as Fremont, such as some other teams that they've been doing. And I think they really deserve to be a top 10 team. When you have teams like Millard North, you have teams like Kearney who really haven't been on the right foot so far this season that are in that top 10. And I think North Platte really needs to, with that win last week and really needs to win this week. With the loss last week, and really needs to win this week to get themselves back into a possible situation. But Lincoln East jumping themselves into the top 10 this week, this past week, and they've really deserved it. They've had some good wins. They probably should have won that Millard North game, to be honest with you. There's some back and forth calls there, but at the end of the day, Millard North would have won that game. I think Lincoln East is the better team between the two of them. If we ever see a matchup once again, and it's very likely we might see another matchup, another 8-9 matchup, 7-10 matchup between those two when we get to the playoffs. It'll be really fun to see what Lincoln East can do going into this first round of the playoffs.
I've been a huge fan of Noah Walters over there at Lincoln East. He can really throw the football. I think he's one of the better passers in Class A. A lot of good quarterbacks this year, including one we're going to see tonight in Cole Payton. But then I was impressed with how Lincoln Pius was able to hold on with Columbus. We saw Columbus play well for the first half, 3 quarters in that Bell West game last night, which we'll get into here in a sec. But holding on, still lost, but only by 10. So really impressed with them. So now our last 3 games of Week 7, Creighton Prep, not a big surprise, dominating Lincoln Northeast 67-0. And then you got Kearney going up against Lincoln High. Another not really surprised, but Kearney continues to win 34-0. I think they're on a 3-game win streak now. And then a surprise, at least to me, I don't think it was a surprise to you because you picked the Silverhawks in this one. But Lincoln Southwest beats Papillion La Vista 25-14. So what do you see in those last 3 games?
Yeah, going off that Lincoln Southwest and Papio game, Papio's just had a really rough season so far. They've had a lot of big losses, and we'll see into this week it's even worse from last night. Not a lot of great teams they've went up against. They've really been playing down their opponents. They're a decent team. They could really put a game together if they needed to. They've been really playing down to their potential so far this year, and that's a thing we've heard so much this year. So many teams playing down to their potential and not doing what they really need to do. And then in that second game, Kearney, easy win over Lincoln High. There's really not much you can talk about there. But, I mean, the win on both sides, Kearney as well as Creighton Prep, huge wins for both teams. Not much different than what we expected going into that game. And I think we'll see a lot of the same for those two teams this week.
Well, yeah, I was really impressed. I thought Creighton Prep would win by a lot, but Creighton Prep's been on a kind of hot streak recently, starting with their big comeback win against Millard West. And I just don't think they're the same team that got destroyed by Westside. I still think they would lose to Westside if they played again, but I feel like they're a way better team than they were at the start of the season, and I like how they've bounced back here in the second half of the season. And then I was surprised with Lincoln Southwest being able to beat Papillion La Vista. You know that I've been a big fan of Papillion La Vista throughout the year, but just weren't able to get it done, and I was impressed with how they handled their business. So now, recapping our game of the week, Elkhorn South and Gretna. Elkhorn South kind of controlling this one, 35-10. They get the win. It was close kind of throughout the first half, but what happened in that game?
I mean, John, we saw in that game, it really came down to the running game. Elkhorn South's running offense is just ridiculous. It's a top 5 running offense that we've seen so far in Class A this season. And the team overall just, chewed up clock, and see how important that is for two teams, kind of different sides of offense. You see Zane Flores for Gretna, his passing ability, his long shot ability for Gretna was really stopped by that Elkhorn South defense, and being able to control the momentum, being able to control both sides of the ball was so important for this team, for Elkhorn South. And if they continue what they did up against Gretna throughout the rest of the season, they could truly be a sleeper contender going into the playoffs.
I mean, yeah, I was really impressed with Elkhorn South. I've liked what they've been doing all year, like running the ball extremely, extremely well. And they shut down Zane Flores. That defense was all over him all night. Wasn't really able to get anything going throughout the entire game. And, yeah, like you said, I think that they're a contender. I think they're definitely proving that. They were able to hang around with Millard South earlier this year, only lost by 3. And I think this is a big game for them. So looking at our rankings here from the Omaha World Herald, no changes in the top 10. Everything remains the same. Of course, you got Westside, Bell West, Millard South, Bell West got a big win last night that we'll talk about in our next segment of the show. Elkhorn South continues to win with Creighton Prep also getting a win. And so, I mean, you like where the top 10's looking at right now, Jaden?
I mean, there's no really much of a difference that you want to see there. I mean, we've talked about, Stu's the one who puts this all together, and he's right on the bat with all of his rankings. I mean, he's doing a great job setting those up. There's really not much of a difference. But the biggest thing that we've been talking about this year, I don't think we have talked about enough, is how these playoffs are going to be set up. So, of course, in recent years, we've seen the wild card standings. The NSA wild card standings is the biggest way to show who's going to win, who's going to get into these different spots. This year, unlike any other, with the differences in schedules, with more games getting canceled from both sides for many different teams, they're actually going to be bringing a committee together, a committee of 5 different athletic directors throughout Class A to be able to, again, this is just Class A only. Class B, Class C will have their normally scheduled setups. But the 24-team bracket will be scheduled actually tomorrow by five different athletic directors throughout Omaha and throughout Lincoln. We'll be choosing the top 24 teams. Again, top 8 will get that first round bye. Bottom 16 will play next week on October 23rd to see if they can keep their seasons alive. I really like what they've seen here. There's really not too much of a difference. We've seen, the only thing I could possibly see, West Side, Bell West, Lincoln Southeast, and Millard South are undoubtedly the top 4, and there's really no change you need to have there. Bell West and West Side are really the 2 top contenders, and back and forth, they've really been able to blow out all their competition, and it really comes down to which one of them should be the 1 seed.
And I got to be honest, I really like how they're doing that this year with the playoffs. It's kind of like how the college football playoff does it with their top 4. And I think it's just going to make sure, because especially after that incident last year with Bell West getting, I believe it was the 3rd or 4th seed instead of the 2nd seed after having an undefeated season and ended up playing number 1 seed in the semifinals. I think after that they knew that it kind of needed to change, and I like what they're doing. I like that they're going to have a committee come in and vote instead of it just being based on their point system. Don't know exactly how that all worked, but I'd really like it. I don't know your opinion on it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on both sides, from what I'm hearing, the idea is that it'll be a mix both of the committee setup, the wild card standings, as well as both the Journal Stars and the Omaha World Herald's rankings that they have set up. They'll look through different athletic directors. They'll ask advice from different experts in the field, I guess, for all of these different teams, and that'll end up putting what we'll see in these next 2 weeks.
So, yeah, tonight could be a big test for the number 1 Westside Warriors, trying to fight for that number 1 spot as we head into the playoffs. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to break down all the Week 8 matchups, including the games from last night. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Nebraska High School Game Day Show Week 8. It is time to break down all the Week 8 matchups, including some games from Thursday night. We actually had 5 scheduled games last night. Only 4 were played because the Gretna Lincoln Southeast game was canceled, but we saw Bellevue East beating Papillion Lavissa, and honestly, this game really surprised me. Bellevue East beating Papillion Lavissa, and then you got Bellevue West. It was a one-score game there at one point between Bellevue West and Columbus, but of course, the Thunderbirds did pull away with that potent offense, and then Elkhorn South barely edging out Kearney, and then Creighton Prep winning pretty easily against Papillion La Vista South. So, I mean, we had some good games last night. Jaden, what were your overall impressions?
I'm going to start off with that Papio as well as the Bellevue East game. I mean, that was just – it's just not a great game you want to see from Papillion La Vista. Their passing game was not there. Their O-line was atrocious against a team like Bellevue East, who is not a perennial, really a contender against a team like that. It's really not what you want to see in the right direction for a program like Papillion La Vista. Then you have that Columbus Bell West game. Columbus was only down by 7 going into half, was tied up, and actually was ahead by 7 early in that first quarter and stopped the Bellevue West offense multiple times in that game. And I don't think we've seen a defense throughout Class A this season who's been able to somewhat stop this Bellevue West potent offense, and they might have the keys to success for some other teams that we want to see so far this season. Of course, Bellevue West is able to take over very well. L.J. Richardson as well as Luke Johansson just balled out in that second half, and they're able to pull away. But a team like Columbus being able to make it scary in that first half might give some advice to some other teams that are going to see Bell West later off in this postseason. Then we saw Elkhorn South and Kearney. Elkhorn South got a fumble as Kearney was trying to drive down the field with only about a minute left in that ball game. Saved a potentially very scary game for them. Elkhorn South really played down to their opponents in Kearney. Kearney, maybe showing that they're a little bit being able to go up against some really big teams, even in an away game at Elkhorn. But with this win for Elkhorn South, not a good one, a very dirty one. We'll see upcoming this week. They'll need to rechange the program the game plan, and see what they need to do these next couple of weeks. Then we saw Creighton Prep going up against Papio South. Creighton Prep was easily able to dominate this game. It wasn't as big as a win as I thought they might have seen them, especially going up against Lincoln Northeast last week, and how they did against them. But it was a really cruise control type win for Creighton Prep.
I was really impressed with how Kearney was able to compete in that game. We've talked about how Kearney hasn't been able to live up to expectations this year, but a part of that has been their tough schedule. They've had a really tough schedule, played some really good teams, and they were able to hang in there with Elkhorn South, went to overtime, and Elkhorn South just barely winning. And then, like you said, Bellevue West, even though they ended up dominating that game, it wasn't throughout the whole 4 quarters like we've seen them play against teams like Millard West and things like that. And so I was just really, really impressed with how Columbus came out in that game. I know they took the loss in this one, but I think they should be very happy with how they perform, not be too upset about that whole game. So now, breaking news yesterday, between Gretna and Lincoln Southeast, the game was canceled at Seacrest because there was a super spreader event, unsanctioned homecoming dance/gathering. So the school did not approve it, and they went out and had their own homecoming dance, and they weren't able to play the season finale. So what was just, your whole reaction to seeing that?
Yeah, it's sad to see, especially in an event like that, outsider, people affect such a game like this. And we knew this coming in. We've seen a lot of different super spreader events through a couple different teams. We saw Creighton Prep had to be out a couple of weeks. We saw North Platte as well as Bell West had to be out a couple weeks for some different games. And, it's really sad to see on both sides how people outside of these districts, how people outside of the guidelines can ruin some teams' events.
We talked about this, I think, the first week, but you got, especially if we want to play this whole season, you got to be smart in what you're doing and make the right decisions. And I just think this was a poor decision by the players and everybody involved at Gretna. If you want to be able to play this season, the coronavirus is still a very big issue today, still affecting a whole lot of people, and we can't just, ignore it. And I think that's kind of what was going on there. We were getting used to things getting a little more normal, and now, unfortunately, this had to happen. So hopefully we'll be able to see those teams next week with the playoffs getting started. And now it's time. We're going to look at our Week 8 schedule here on Friday. Got some pretty good games starting out. Lincoln High, Lincoln Southwest. Lincoln Southwest, I think, pretty favored in this one. Jaden, what are you looking for in this one?
I mean, I'm saying the same thing there. I mean, Lincoln Southwest, a really good win up against Papio last week. They're going to be able to run the ball a lot this week. That's going to be their main factor. Going up against a team in Lincoln High. Lincoln High, over at Beechner Complex. This game is actually going on right now, the 4:30 game at Seacrest. But Lincoln High has had a really tough season. All those Lincoln teams have really not gotten on the right foot, other than Lincoln Southeast as well as Lincoln East. And I see. I mean, the back and forth of this game, Lincoln Southeast is going to be a run-dominant team. It's going to be a really slow game going into that nightcap. But we want to see Lincoln Southwest controlling the momentum going into this game.
So then you got Millard North and Fremont. I mean, Fremont has had a pretty good season. What are they going to have to do to pull off the upset tonight against Millard North?
I mean, like we've talked about it a lot, Jimmy Quaintance is going to have to run the ball and is going to have to put the team on his back. The O-line assignments are going to be the biggest factor for that team. Being able to make sure there's not any busted holes, not any busted gaps for a big boy type of defensive line that we've seen in Fremont. Their defense has really been a big factor, losing their starting quarterback to start off their season. The defense has really been a huge part of their game. Going up against a team, that flex bone type of offense in Millard North, it's really going to be an interesting matchup to see if Fremont can really contain that Millard North offense.
So then you got three kind of games all spread out here that are kind of one-sided, at least on paper. You got Norfolk traveling to Grand Island, Lincoln East going up against Lincoln Northeast. Lincoln Northeast trying to avoid going 0-8 in the regular season, and then Lincoln North Star going to play the really good Millard South Patriots. So, I mean, do you see anything other than what's projected in these games?
Yeah, I don't. I think it's going to be – I think Lincoln Northeast is going to try to keep themselves. It's the last game of the season for them, at least the regular season. They're luckily going to be able to play in the playoffs in that first round. But especially in a game like that, it's going to be really important for them to really get back in this, try to leave off this regular season on a good note. They won't win this game. I'd be very interested, very unlikely to see if Lincoln Northeast can win this nightcap up against Lincoln East. But Lincoln East is going to bring in those backup guys to see how their depth controls in those back few games, especially if they want to maybe be a sleeper pick, making a deep run in the playoffs. Then we see Millard South going up against Lincoln North Star. It's going to be, Millard South is going to have to run the ball a lot. They're going to bring a lot more, it's going to be a really big depth tonight for all of these different teams, for Millard South as well as Lincoln East, as well as all these teams here. But I think we're going to see a lot of secondary guys, and we're going to see if these secondary guys, if guys get hurt, if guys can't play throughout these playoffs. It's going to be really interesting to see how the secondary guys can come in and fill a role.
Our last two games wrapping up. Norris traveling to play Lincoln Pius, which I'm curious to hear what you think about this game. I think this could be close, especially after we saw Pius and Columbus. And then Millard West trying to get back on the winning track as they head into the playoffs against number 10 North Platte. So give me your thoughts on those two.
Yeah, Millard West is really going to have to get right on their foot. Nathan Peterson's going to have a big game. Their offensive line is going to be so important for that team's success, in that game. And North Platte trying to play a little bit of a spoiler in this game for a team like Millard West. Millard West really needs to get back to being a prevalent team in Class A. They've had a ton of injuries so far this season. Hopefully they're able to get a few guys back from that injury side. But we'll see if Millard West can really pull through against a team that's a little bit of a sleeper pick in North Platte. And then we saw, in that other game, Norris is going to be a team that, they're a Class B team. Again, we don't really look too much at these Class B teams. But Norris is a team that has a lot of star-studded recruiting. Their number one tight end is going to Nebraska this season, after this season, committed there just a few weeks ago. And I think they just have a really big lineup going up against Lincoln Pius. And I think that's that middle ground to where we can see the difference between Class A and Class B. But I think Norris is going to be able to come out to play and try to get on a really good side of the foot and show that, they can be one of the top teams no matter what class.
Yeah, talking about Millard West, for me personally, for a sec, been a tough regular season, a lot of injuries. Jacob Jones, torn ACL. Zach Coleman's been out for the year, but I'm proud of how they fought. I think this is going to be a tough game for them. North Platte has proved that they can play pretty well, and it would be a big maybe not a huge upset, but an upset against Millard West. Even with all their struggles this year, I still think they are a pretty good team. But I really hope that the guys can get a win. It's been a tough season for them. I know that they think that they're a couple plays away from being one of the best teams in the state. And so it's just been a tough season, but I'm looking for them to come out and fight in this one. And then, you never know with Norris and Lincoln Pius. I feel like Pius could maybe pull an upset off here just because of how I saw them play last week. I think they're getting better throughout the season, and I think it could be a good one. So now our Nebraska High School Game Day Game of the Week. Jaden and I will have that on Warrior Television. West Side Warriors playing the St. Thomas Aquinas Saints, two of the best teams in their respective states. So looking at how they match up, Jaden, I mean, one likes to run the ball and one does both really well. And so what are you looking for in this game?
I mean, there's two big factors that I want to see here: the injury side of the ball, as well, the injuries that have plagued St. Thomas Aquinas a little bit, and some of the injuries that are on West Side. And then we also see clock management. The clock management is going to be huge for both of these teams. Very two different styles of tempo. You see West Side with a very quick tempo style of offense. We saw up against Grand Island a few weeks ago. As well as Papio South, 28 points in the first quarter. Multiple touchdown drives that lasted under a minute, under 2 minutes, and that's really the game plan that these Warriors have put together so far this season. St. Thomas Aquinas' defense is going to be crucial to how this game is going to go. If St. Thomas Aquinas defense, as well as specifically their secondary, if they can control a lot of these wide receivers, guys like Kobe Retz, guys like Avante Dickerson, guys like Grant Guyette, if they can control that secondary, it's going to be huge momentum for them to be able to get back on the right track and get a win. Other on the injury side of the ball, Dominic Rizak out last week, had a surgery on his retina, had a hole in his retina last week, out in a pretty small game going up against Norfolk. But Avante Dickerson, a guy who hasn't been a running back since last season, put up an amazing night. 5 total touchdowns, 3 rushing, 1 receiving, as well as 1 on the defensive side of the ball. But Dominic Rizak coming back, really being that north-south runner, is going to be greatly important for them. On the Aquinas side of the ball, Blake Anderson out for the season. Their number 1 quarterback, sophomore Maxwell Ford's going to have to step in and be able to take over this team. We've seen the last 2 weeks. He struggled the last 2 weeks being able to lead this team, especially last week in a loss against the number 1 ranked team in Kansas, Lawrence. Both sides of the ball, clock management, like we said, is going to be huge. Being able to control the game overall is going to be able to control the momentum, especially in a game like this.
Well, yeah, like you said, I think that St. Thomas is going to have to control the clock in this one. I mean, that's what they've kind of done. They run the ball with Tank Young, who has been a main source of their offense this year. He's played extremely well, putting up big numbers, but I think they're going to have to be able to do both tonight. I mean, I don't think they're going to have to, throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns or anything like that, but they got to be able to keep that West Side defense on their heels, because we know that the Warriors defense is going to prepare for the run. That's what they're looking for, because that's what the Saints do well. And so we know that they've prepared for that, and so they're going to have to be able to do both, pass and throw the football, if they're going to beat a West Side, outscore a West Side offense that can do both. Cole Payton, a very versatile quarterback. They've been able to run the football really well all year and throw the football. And so I think this is going to be a tough one for the Saints. I think West Side should go into this game favored, but I definitely think this is going to be a really good game tonight.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very back and forth game, and not to mention that, I've been talking to Coach Freund, and I've been seeing some film of what we've seen from St. Thomas Aquinas. Their secondary, like we've said earlier, is going to be very important for them. If they can get back on the line, if they don't jump, that's going to be really important. We've seen both of their linebackers as well as their defensive backs being able to jump on some of the routes. We've seen multiple guys trying to be able to jump up on the inner routes and be able to cut off to the middle side. A very big open thing that we want to see for West Side. If they can control the middle of the field, it's going to be very important for them.
So we are going to take our last break here on Nebraska High School Game Day Show Week 8, but when we come back, it's our picks time, including one from a special guest. We will see who it is when we come back on Nebraska High School Game Day. All right, and it is time for our picks part of the show here on Nebraska High School Game Day. We are joined by our special guest picker, Brandon Axamit from the News Channel Nebraska. How are you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to make some picks. I'm excited for the football game that's going to take place behind us, as I'm sure you guys are as well. And beautiful weather for it. Fall football, crisp air, and it's get ready to go. Less than 2 hours from kickoff.
Yeah, really excited for that one. But let's get into our game picks. Starting out the game that's going on right now, Lincoln High and Lincoln Southwest. Jaden, I'll send it down to you to get us started.
I think Lincoln Southwest had a really big win last week and a really convincing win up against a team like Papillion La Vista. And I think they'll do the same up against Lincoln High. Like we've said, their running game is going to be really interesting to see. And that's really going to be the biggest factor. The O-line as well as both their running back, they put that little bit of an option offense that they put out there. And it's going to be really important for them to win this ball game. And I think they'll be able to pull this one out.
And I am going to have to agree with you, Jaden, on that one. Lincoln Southwest, one of the top-tier teams in Lincoln when you look at the teams coming out of Lincoln, and Lincoln High kind of on the bottom half. When you look at comparative opponents and how Columbus has played against Lincoln High, specifically a team that we cover on News Channel Nebraska, and the score there, I just don't think the Lynx have enough firepower to take on the Silverhawks, and Lincoln Southwest gets the win.
Yeah, I'm agree with you. I really liked how they played against Papillion La Vista because as I've told Jaden a million times, I've really liked what the Monarchs are doing this year. But they played really well, and I think they continue that momentum over and play a good game tonight against Lincoln High. So moving on, you got Norfolk traveling to play Grand Island. You saw Norfolk last week. Do you see anything for them this week, Jaden?
Not really. It was a really rough week for them last week up against Westside. I mean, I know it's Westside, one of the top perennial teams in Nebraska so far this season. But Norfolk has just really had a tough overall back and forth season. And up against a team like Grand Island, I think Grand Island is going to be able to pull this one out. Another really run-dominant team. They've been able to pass the ball a lot so far this season as well. And I think their dual style of offense is going to be really important for them. And I think they'll pull this one out.
2 for 2, agreeing with Jaden. Grand Island, I think, gets the victory. It's been really interesting. This is a down year for the Islanders, which, they're always usually a power out of central Nebraska, and they just lost so many seniors. But with that being said, they have a coach by the name of Jeff Tomlin who does so much well. It's a home game, and they've put in Kyton Fife, the dual-threat quarterback who's taken over for Jaden Jurgensmeyer, and he's been doing a lot of really, really good things. Shout out to Grand Island Public Schools, though. They are allowing Norfolk families to attend the game. It's been a weird thing at Grand Island where visiting opponents were not allowed to bring fans for the most of this season due to the COVID-19 restrictions. So that's a nice storyline. The Norfolk Panthers fans will be able to come. Unfortunately for them, I think they're going to go away disappointed, and the Islanders get the win. Yeah,
I'm agreeing with you. I liked how they played against Millard North last week. I think that they were right in that game, forced overtime at Buell Stadium with the student section. It was a really close game. Weren't able to pull it out, but I was really impressed with how they played. And going up against a lesser team of Norfolk, I think they're going to get the win tonight. So moving on, Lincoln East, number 8 now ranked in the Omaha World Herald rankings, going up against Lincoln Northeast. One-sided on paper. Jaden, is it going to be that way in the game?
Yeah, I think as well. I mean, Noah Walters has really been that big factor for this team so far this season. And I think they'll be able to pull it out up against a really bottom feeder in Lincoln Northeast. Lincoln Northeast has had a really rough season so far, and I think East is going to be able to pull this one out pretty easily.
This pains me to say because I am a Lincoln Northeast alum of 2007 and Lincoln East, our biggest, most hated rivals, but I do not see the Rockets getting the victory. You mentioned they're number 8, the number 2 team in Lincoln, below, of course, Lincoln Southeast. I don't think the Rockets can do it. Unfortunately, Lincoln East gets the victory.
Yeah, I'm agree with you as well. I like what Lincoln East is doing right now. I think they had a little bit of an off week last week, offensive-wise, only putting up 21 against the North Platte Bulldogs. But I think they're going to come back. This is an opportunity for their offense to get a whole lot of momentum going into these playoffs coming up. So now you got the 9th-ranked Millard North Mustangs going out to play the Fremont Tigers. Fremont, I think, with a big opportunity here to kind of prove their worth. Jaden, do you see Fremont pulling off an upset here?
Yeah, I think I want to see, Micah Moore has really been their rushing offense so far this season. They've had both of their quarterbacks so far this season, being able to be a little bit of dual threat. But I think Micah Moore, in the overall offensive line that Fremont has so far this season, will be able to bring somewhat technically an upset up against Millard North. I know a lot of people might want to see Millard North to be able to win this game, but I've really been on the Fremont bandwagon so far this season, and I think they'll be able to pull this one out.
First time disagreeing with you, Jaden. I am going to go with Millard North. Now, I think this is going to be a close one. Now, the Tigers, I think, have surprised some people with how well they've done this year, and it's always that interesting thing you're trying to balance when you have a Metro team taking on a team who's not in the Metro of Lincoln or Omaha, and the records might not quite be matching up. But I do think that triple option of Millard North might be a little bit too much for Fremont. I think they get a narrow victory over the Tigers.
Yeah, I think Millard North is going to play in another close game. They played in a lot of close games this year against Lincoln East and then last week against Grand Island. I think Millard North is going to get the win as well. I'm going to go with Brandon on that one. I really like Jimmy Quains and how he can run the football, and I like how that triple option, you usually see all the Millard teams kind of running that offense, and it usually works. And so I'm going to pick Millard North also in a close one. So moving on, you got the 6-1 Norris Titans going up against Lincoln Pius. I mean, I've been really high on Lincoln Pius. Jaden, what are you thinking, though?
I think Pius, is another little of a bottom feeder in Lincoln. You see Lincoln Northeast as well as Lincoln High. Pius has really had a rough season down at Aldridge Field. A lot of games for them, but I think Norris has really been a big factor so far this season. They've had a lot of big guys up on the line, and they've been running the ball well, surprisingly for a team like that. But they've also been passing it extremely well up against some Class B teams. They're a really big Class B contender so far this season. Unlike in Class A, we've seen a ton of parity in Class B. A lot of teams, you see Waverly, you see a little bit of Bennington, you see Elkhorn, you see Scott. All those teams going back and forth. And I think Norris has really been able to compete against those top teams, and I think they'll be able to pull it out up against Lincoln Pius.
I'm going to agree with you on that one. Norris, we have them at number 2 in our rankings, right below Bennington in Class B. It's always interesting when you get to see the A and Bs go against one another, particularly when it's a weaker A opponent against a strong Class B. And I'm going to go with the Titans on this one. I think they're going to knock off a Class A foe and strengthen their wild cards even more.
I'm going to go against you two here. I'm going to pick an upset with Lincoln Pius. I mean, like I said, I really liked how they played last week against Columbus. Only a 10-point loss, last night. Only losing 34-24. They were able to hang around against a pretty good Class A team, and I think they're going to be able to win. I think it's going to be really close, but I am going to pick Lincoln Pius and probably kind of an upset. So, 2 more games here before we get to our game of the week. You got Millard West struggling this year, but got an opportunity to bounce back against the North Platte number 10 Bulldogs. What are you seeing in this game, Jaden?
I mean, it's a really back and forth game. We see a really struggling team in Millard West. I think Nathan Peterson is going to be the way you want to see in this game. I think Millard West is going to be able to get back on the right foot and win a game up against North Platte. I think it's going to be a close one. This game is going to come down to that fourth quarter. To where what team can really, like we said, a ton so far this year. Clock management is going to be huge. A really big running offense for this team, and I think they'll be able to pull one out late in the fourth quarter.
I'm going to go with the Bulldogs on this one. You always talk about, like I referenced earlier, Metro versus a non-Metro team. And North Platte, they've had a couple of tough contests the last 2 weeks against Metro opponents. I think they say this week, the 3rd week in a row, we're done getting beat up by Metro opponents. We're going to take down the Wildcats. I think North Platte does get the victory.
I'd really like to think that my personal Millard West Wildcats could get the W this week. But like you said, it's going to come down to Nathan Peterson. I mean, Brady Brau's been struggling a little bit at the quarterback position, is still kind of getting into his rhythm after having to come in for Jacob Jones. And he's still figuring out things, but he's getting better every week. And I think, Millard West hasn't been able to close out the fourth quarter. We've seen that in these past couple games against Lincoln East and Creighton Prep, blowing pretty big fourth quarter leads. But I think they're finally going to be able to hold on to one, and I think they're going to narrowly beat the Bulldogs in this one. So, last game before our game of the week, Lincoln North Star traveling to Buell Stadium to play the number 3 Millard South Patriots. Jaden, what are you thinking?
This game's going to be another blowout. I mean, we're going to see a lot of backups come in. I want to see a lot of those sophomores as well as juniors who are going to be secondary guys like we talked about earlier to see really if Millard West can upset some of their opponents maybe going into the playoffs. It's going to be super important for them to be able to have extra guys in case of injuries. And we've seen that Millard West. Millard West has had secondary guys not be able to step up as much as they need to. And I think it's going to be really important for Millard South to see if they can do the same in this game up against Lincoln North Star. But, I mean, TJ Urban's going to be able to get out of there after about halfway through the second quarter. And I think Millard South will be able to pull this one out pretty easily.
Have to agree with you on that one. I think this is going to be a simple case of Millard South is just too good for Lincoln North Star, and for the reasons you mentioned, TJ Urban, just a phenomenal quarterback, and the offense that they run on the ground, I don't think the Gators have a chance to hang in on this one, unfortunately for them.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pretty much hit all the points there. I really like what Millard South is doing. Only lost that one to Bellevue West, and Bellevue West, of course, right up there with West Side. And I think Millard South will win big, carry some momentum, probably get a bye as we head into the postseason. So it's now time to pick our Nebraska High School Game Day Game of the Week, the one that we are about to have behind us. And it's a good one. Two of the top teams in their respective states playing each other. The number 1 Westside Warriors going against number 3 in their class, St. Thomas Aquinas Saints. Jaden, we'll go with you first.
Yeah, I think this is, for not many fans who know about Aquinas or in Westside's perspective, I mean, Aquinas is the number 3 team in that 5A class that population-wise is technically the Class B of Kansas, but the difference in competition is way different than it is in Class A. But I really see, the injuries that have plagued Aquinas so far this season. Blake Anderson is one of the biggest factors for this team. And I think it's going to really come down to the offensive line. We've seen the number one center in the state of Kansas, Danny Carroll, is going to be the main guy you want to see in that matchup at the O-line. We see both Will Hurtado as well as Ben Radisha as well as Cole Hartman on that defensive line. And I think that's really where this game is going to be shown in the trenches somewhat in that game. What we saw last week, Aquinas went up against Lawrence, probably the number 1 team, easily the number 1 team in the state of Kansas in that 6A bracket. And they're able to hang around with them a little bit in that game. Lawrence pulled out to a pretty big lead in that first quarter. But I really think Westside's an even better team than Lawrence. The dual threat offense that they have, when you add all their skill players along with Avante Dickerson, you look at Dominic Rizek, you look at Cole Payton, the factors that they bring to this team is unlike any other that we've seen in Nebraska in a while. And going up against a team that in Aquinas, that really their only big threat is one wide receiver, as well as their main guy who's been running the ball is Tank Young. I think Tank Young is going to be a really big factor in this game. He's going to have a breakout game so far up against a team like Westside, but I don't think he's really going to be able to be as much of a factor or enough of a factor for Aquinas to be able to take this game.
A lot of the things you said I would agree with. That is the big issue for Aquinas. Blake Anderson, their quarterback out, who is a good running threat, and they run that triple option offense so well into a T, which is a staple for Aquinas. And you talk about Maxwell Ford, who comes in. Now, he's a quarterback that can pass the ball very well, which will be interesting to see how Coach Dreiling tries to get that to work with their triple option offense. In addition, though, Evan Kammerer, the leading receiver who has over 250 yards and 4 touchdowns, he is also out with injury. So when you talk about, playing to the strength of Ford, which is the pass, your second leading receiver and the only guy left on this team for Aquinas is a guy who only has 54 yards receiving. So you have a strength of a quarterback who's coming in for a running quarterback. You run a rushing offense. I don't know how Aquinas is going to be able to deal with that. And because of the injuries you mentioned, because of Westside being healthy relative to Aquinas, I do think that Westside gets the victory. Very interesting, though, too, the loss last week to Lawrence, the first loss in the regular season for Aquinas since 2017. So to say that Aquinas is going to lose 2 in a row is crazy, but I think the Warriors are going to get the victory. I'm going to say 28-17. I'm putting a score on it.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good game. But like I said, if St. Thomas wants to win this game, they're going to have to be able, I think, to control the clock, not give that really dangerous Westside offense a whole lot of opportunities. We've seen Cole Payton make plays all year along with all their skilled players. I don't like how they match up. Talking about the offense for St. Thomas, especially without their starting quarterback, Blake Anderson, the offense mainly runs through Tank Young, I think. That's how it is, at least looking stat-wise. And so I think they need more than that going up against such a dangerous Westside offense because they can run, they can throw the ball, they can do a whole lot to score on you. And so I think this is going to be a close game. Maybe Westside can win by 10, 14, but I am going to take Westside in this one to finish out the regular season strong.
Yeah, great picks on both sides. It's going to be a great game. The game is going to be on Warrior Television as well as NCN, both here as well as in Kansas City. A great matchup to see, just about an hour and a half away from kickoff. I know you guys have your pregame show. We have our pregame show at 6:30. John Willis and I will be on that game. Thank you guys so much for coming to this matchup, being able to watch this game. We're going to be back next week wherever our matchup is going to show. A lot of great matchups next week in the first round of the state playoffs. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Jaden Taylor. Alongside me here tonight, John Willis, as well as Brandon Axman. That's going to be all for us tonight. Thank you so much.